Hello and welcome to another video. So as I mentioned in the last video, we were going to be taking a look at Crumsion's Blood deck, which has been pretty great. I mean, Darkface Bat is still an extremely powerful deck, even though Midsword is starting to rise up to really counter it quite hard. We've seen a massive meta shift where the Midsword is kind of starting to eclipse Blood in the sense of both play rate and win rate, which is not a surprise. We were bound to see a big counter, and that happened to be it. So that's not too big a shock. We'll probably still see nerfs of Blood coming in the next couple of weeks, but honestly I don't think it should be hit super hard. It should probably just have some light touches here and there to lower the consistency of some of the early turns, and that should fix it up. But overall this deck was super solid. Of course it is a pretty stock standard Blood deck as far as things go. I don't see anything that really stands out to me as, oh, this was put in for a tournament. It's mostly just your pretty standard cards, so we're going to get right into it and take a look. So our first matchup is a Blood on Blood mirror match. Not a big shock there. Blood, like I said, is still pretty popular. Like, as I mentioned, is definitely dying off though, so not a big surprise. I also do like those sleeves quite a bit. I kind of wish I had those ones, but I didn't decide to go for those when I bought the pre-built stuff, which I only bought for sleeves anyway, so not a big shock. Starting off with the early parish, not a big surprise. More surprised they didn't hold anything, and my Disciple of Lust was actually a pretty decent draw. Sometimes you've got to weigh up whether it's worth holding on for a potential combo or whether it's just better off playing the consistent turns, so that's always something I rush into deciding early on in the game. In this situation I decided to just go for the early turns and play what I could where I could to get the early build up, which I feel like is usually the better way to play these Blood decks than to rely purely on swing turns. When you do get a chance at a swing turn though, it's always quite nice. Like in this case, I decided to hold off a little bit. I didn't go for Blood, I went for the draw just so I could kind of set up a little bit in case I have a chance at going for it. Unfortunately, Razor Cord does end up being a little bit of a counter, and I don't get the option to really go for the really hard Blood Pact. But why not go for a nice Vera? I mean, it's basically going to take no damage. I'm going to draw for free, and I can set up pretty nicely. So our Darkface Bat and our Omen of Loss should be pretty set as far as stats go. 6, and that will also be 6 of course. So we do just need one single damage to make the Omen of Lust viable, which with Scorpus we should be okay.
Did you like it?
And we're looking at a pretty nice turn. Being able to Evo this, pretty much block out the board, and defeat our opponent pretty well in the coming couple of turns. Definitely something that should work in our favour, as we have way more than enough damage on our Darkface Bat at this point, with pretty substantial being at 7, so turn 6 all we need to do is deal at least 1 damage to ourselves, or they can ping themselves, that's all fine as well. This Evil Eye Demon though is going to be a little rough for us, so it's going to pretty much wipe us out, even if it was at the cost of their turn. But why not? We got another one, we're going to use our third Vera, we're going to block this turn off as well, and pretty much guarantee that our Darkface Bat's going to win us the game. So even going second, if you can Vera at the right moment, it can really screw over your opponent's turn 7 plays. So this gave us way more than enough chance to go for lethal and set up a really nice board that has to be dealt with. So it makes it really hard for them to go for any kind of defensive play, as they are forced to deal with what I currently have. Even that little bit of healing just isn't going to be enough to counter this upcoming Darkface Bat. It's going to be too nuts to handle. So no big shock there.
Love for the sake of the world. I never forget. My word is my bond.
So our next turn, Darkface Bat is going to close the game for a pretty comfortable amount of damage. Just over half of his total health. Next up, we are up against Shadow. Shadow's positioned itself as mid-range at the moment, I would say. Mid-range Shadow in itself is actually pretty decent. Arcus Shadow deck seem to be doing okay on ladder, and overall it's just kind of in the middle ground. It's not necessarily bad, but it's not necessarily good. It's kind of just floating right in between. Of course, there has been some impressive decks in tournaments for Shadow, but I think that's more the tournament meta than anything, as the decks themselves on ladder at least don't seem to perform quite as nicely. I think it's more that you can predict a meta when it comes to tournaments, as compared to on ladder where you're going to run into a lot of random stuff, and it can be quite difficult to deal with that. So we're just going to kind of round this out so far, just kind of going for wherever we can, setting up a Blazing Sapphire to take advantage of as we go through the game. Getting those extra draws will always help out a blood deck like this. Fran's Monster Girl, that's a little rough. It's not exactly the card I wanted to deal with, but at least it was used immediately. Now we just need to kind of set ourselves up nicely. So we're looking at a pretty solid turn next turn. Being able to use Razor, Gift and Parish all at the same time, along with the fact that our Sapphire will proc, provided we can do that, which by the looks of the current board, it shouldn't really be a problem. And we get Blood Pact. I did go for the Evil Eye Demon though, because I modded the extra ping there. And we'll go for the Parish anyway, because we're not really looking for the Flavorous combo anymore, and I'm pretty sure there's only 2 Flavorous in this deck. When I was playing this deck, I was wondering if I had a third one, and I think I made a play to try and get one, and unfortunately didn't pull it, so I do think there is only 2. But a 7-3 on 5 isn't a bad way to go with an Evo point, so can't really go wrong with that, especially with the heal. It's definitely one of the most powerful cards as far as blood goes right now. So a nice little Zero turn is going to kind of stop anything major from happening. And we're going to have a pretty comfortable Blood Pact. I probably should have went for the Evil Eye Demon here instead and cleared out the board, but didn't end up doing so. And this was actually the play. I was aiming for a third Florus. Unfortunately, obviously don't have one because we definitely struck ourselves 4 times there. It would have been nice if the other one was in the deck, then that would have been a much better turn. And then I could have probably justified the extra draw play. So another Fran Monster Girl. Really must have just been looking for draws at this point. Definitely a weird move. Not the move I would have made for that one. But we're looking at a very nice turn. We're going to leave them on 1 HP, and I don't think there was any way that they could have possibly killed me in the next turn. As no matter what they would have done, they wouldn't have had enough damage. Even with this Evo point, I think at most they could have managed would have been 14 damage on that turn with a full board buff of +2. So we were pretty much set to win the game with another Darkface Bat. Now the final game for this video, because Blood was going quite well and doing alright, I decided to throw a third game into this one just for a little bit of extra. Plus going up against Portal is a nice bit of variety, as some Portal floating around is a bit iffy here and there, honestly. Actually, tomorrow's video should be quite interesting. I've got a true budget deck for Sword, which should be quite nice to play out. And we're actually going to have a game where I do lose, but it's quite an intense one, so definitely look forward to that tomorrow. So we start off pretty early, going for the Blood Pact, mainly just looking for a 0 drop because that would have gave me the turn 2 play. This was one of the situations where going for the combo was actually worthwhile. Unfortunately, missing out on that draw was a little disappointing. And I honestly now don't have a way to really pull that combo off effectively without getting a really good draw here. And unfortunately, that's just not the draw I needed. So if they played a follower, we could have actually had it again. We could have went for the combo, but it looks like our opponent kind of was expecting that. Luckily for us, we ended up with another Parish, so we actually can do the combo anyway. It is a little rough, but it should work out just fine. It's a pretty nice way to go on turn 4, so considering our opponent has avoided playing anything, we're looking at a fairly nice, consistent play. There is the Omen of Destruction. Pretty predictable, honestly, that was going to happen. Once you see puppets, you can kind of expect it to be Omen portal over artifact portal, which is normally pretty good. They go for their trade-off. We're going to heal 8 next turn, so we're pretty set as far as health goes.
Is my bond.
And we're actually going to draw a few extra cards, which is going to really stock our hand right up here.
Love for the sake
And Omen of Lust is a great way to normally deal with things. Unfortunately, completely blanking on the fact that I wasn't going to be able to clear that anyway, but mainly just looking for damage as far as things go, so it wasn't a big issue to leave up the 3/6 either way. I would have had to force out too much damage to remove it, so definitely worth just leaving it there right now. Especially considering how next turn will most likely play out with a pretty consistent hand. So go face, throw the Evil Eye, go for the nice little Evo and the Disciple, and we're going to pretty much wipe this out here. So a Dark Feast Bat will pretty much guarantee us lethal at this point. I believe we've boosted up to 9 damage. So as long as even 1 damage can stick on this board, we should be set. Which, considering what they've got to do to remove this, is fairly good for us. So there's a Destruction in white. Not even going to get a chance to take advantage of that here, as they really got a bigger problem with what I'm going to play next. So obviously Dark Feast Bat would be lethal, which would be a legendary top deck. Just knowing that I've played this game, I know that top deck is Dark Feast Bat. Definitely what we wanted. Perfect lethal there in the end. And of course, we would have had better options if we had a buy time, but that top deck was pretty much the perfect option. So Dark Feast Bat is still a super consistent, super easy deck to play out and kind of win games with. Like I said, Crimson's decks were pretty solid. I can definitely see why he got through to the World Grand Prix, and I look forward to following him through that, as that should be pretty awesome to watch. He is always a pretty good player, honestly. I would say one of the best players, at least from what I've seen, constantly topping events and doing fairly well, and obviously everyone else is doing insanely well on top of that, so always nice to showcase some of his decks and go through them. If you guys did enjoy this video, hit the like button and subscribe. You'll find the deck list in the description below. Until next time, see ya.